the denial lies in the fact that it's all our fault, really. It's bombs go off, regimes are toppled, well, it's because of Bush, it's because of Blair, blah, 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 blah. And I think that is a kind of denial which ignores the vitality of totalitarianism. People forget its appeal. And as the history of the 20th century shows, the totalitarian movements do have a life and a logic of their own. They can't simply be reduced to root causes. Now, once that denial's gone, a bit like once the denial of global warming's gone, all you've got is clear ground. Reasonable people can argue about what should be done about it. But I think that, but while denial is there, I don't think you can have a serious debate.
Well, I think you can have a serious debate while people anybody carries on sort of flogging away an imagined enemy. And I think that there is a huge tendency to demonise the whole of Islam as the enemy, and that there's a lot of very difficult and dangerous rhetoric all around that, and that in various ways our leaders and our press don't help with that, and that there's a kind of totalitarianism in saying we have to be against that sort of person for those sorts of reasons. It's lazy the way we sort of all talk about Islamic fundamentalists, and I only mean those ones, without really, really knowing which ones we mean and which ones are our friends and which ones are our enemies.
I'm quite clear on that, and I'm also saying that if you can't support people in the Muslim world, including in this country, who share your values, that calls your values into question. It's also against your self-interest, because if you don't back people who may not agree with you on everything, you wouldn't expect them to, but if you don't back people who basically are committed to democratic values, then you'll make their defeat a little bit easier, and their defeat will be your defeat.
But Muslim values are perfectly compatible with democratic values.
No,
the only thing that really we are strong on in the West that Muslim values aren't compatible with is neoliberalism.
Well, you keep falling into the rather Islamophobic thing of slipping from. What I'm talking about are movements of the Islamic right. Al-Qaeda.
I agree with you entirely that they are a huge threat. They are a huge threat.
Islami.
And have to be stood against.
Yes,
and
good.
Argued for that, of course.
As for the rest, I don't know. I'm not talking about the Muslims. I spend the whole book arguing against the Muslims, the Jews, the whites, this whole thing of saying we have got to politicise ethnic politics. We've got to stop thinking that left and right are colour-coded terms and only apply to white people, that within Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, there are lefts, there are liberals, there are rights, and there are extreme rights. I thought one of the most interesting things that's been written about this book came from a chap called Martin Kettle at The Guardian. And he put it far better than I did, actually, in the book. He said, look, it's very, very hard to see what the left as what is the left today? Partly because I go into so much of what liberal-minded, left-minded people in this room 100 years ago would have wanted has been got. Victory is a kind of it empties you because there's nothing worth fighting for. It is very clear across the world what the far right is, and I think that if people, indeed, democratic conservatives, democratic-minded liberals and leftists should be able to oppose that and should be able to support the victims of those movements, the opponents of those movements. I know it's only a little thing you'll say, he's only the mayor of London, he doesn't matter. But,
no, I can't stand Ken.
Yeah, awful. But, Livingston's alliance with Al-Qaradawi, who's a key theologian in Muslim Brotherhood.
No, it's absolutely appalling.
No, but there are again, beleaguered and probably on the losing side of history. It looks like that's at the moment. Mainly Egyptian liberals who petition the UN, saying he's one of our preachers of hate. He's a threat to our lives if we speak out. all for female circumcision, killing the gays, killing the Jews, all the rest of it. And one of the leading figures of the British left chooses to ignore them and go with their enemy.
Yeah, that's absolutely appalling, Livingston.
That again is, again, not very much comment about it in the liberal press.
Well,
not very much fuss about it. Nothing on the BBC. This is odd. This is worth fighting, and it's worth arguing about, and worth trying to understand how we got into this state.
Of course it is, but just as we're talking about a right-wing minority of Muslims, we are also talking about a tiny left wing in Britain that is.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Look. I mean, who's that?
We're doing. The thing is, it's a mirror image of the two things. We allow the Muslim right to shape our own views too much, and we allow this.
Okay. Who was that?
Left to distort things too much.
Who was that chap the BBC had wandering around America looking at cults and sex with dark glasses?
Louis Theroux.
Look, if this was just about Livingston, Galloway, all of that, I could have done a sort of Louis Theroux book. Been quite fun, but it wouldn't have mattered. What interests me is the liberal mainstream in Britain and in Europe. And whether, you can argue it both ways, I argue both ways in the book, you can either say that ideas that begin with the obscurantism of the postmodern philosophers or on the wreckage of the far left after the death of socialism have flooded the liberal mainstream, or maybe what you call or I call the far left is just an exaggeration of the vices of the liberal mainstream. I don't know, but look, none of this would matter if indifference to liberals, feminists and socialists in the Muslim world was not endemic on the liberal mainstream. But I know Iranian feminists from the Workers' Communist Party of Iran, and I spoke to our friends and said, when have you ever been on Women's Hour? Never. Never. I mean, there she is battling for the rights of women, never asked to go on. If you want to take it away from the Muslim world, because frankly, if I was a British Muslim, I'd be sick to death of hearing the word Muslim every time I turned on the TV. China ought to be an absolute nightmare for anyone who vaguely calls themselves left-wing. They've got the Communist Party represses free trade unions, sends their leaders to the camps, and at the same time as allowing Western corporations far more power to exploit than they would ever enjoy in an allegedly capitalist West, even remotely capitalist, really. And again, while none of these things are issues. So on the one hand, you get people. Not you, Deborah, of course. But on the one hand, you get people who seem filled with righteous anger and political commitment. But on the other hand, you can just see, maybe they're just rich, comfortable people looking for a quiet life and not wanting to go to boring meetings and sign the petitions and go on little demos and try and get, someone from outside the rich world, a bit of prominence in the press and their case taken up and so on.
Well, they go to a demo, don't they, and they get an SWT, hoardings, SWP posters sort of banged into their mitt. Anyway, thanks very much, Nick. Does anyone have questions?
Ladies there.
Hold on. Oh, sorry. My mic. Thank you, Deborah. I thought, Nick, you captured a zeitgeist with private ambiguities that people feel where they don't align themselves with either left or right. And someone who I think embodies those ambiguities at the moment is David Cameron. Some of his policies on global warming, the fact that he smokes marijuana, makes myself and my friends who are traditionally left-wing actually feel sort of quite warm towards him and inclined towards him, and that's a very scary thing. And I'm just wondering if you see David Cameron as a symptom of the left drifting away, and there's this big gap where right-wing politicians can fill that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I'm just temperamentally averse to politicians in the Clinton, Blair, Cameron mould. But it may just be those are the politicians who win, or particularly television. They're ideally suited to television. It's been very interesting. I was talking to my colleague on the New Statesman, Martin Bright, who's doing an awful lot about how but frankly war criminals from Bangladesh are